90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. My special guest today is Ira Kaufman. He's an attorney with over 25 years' experience representing all aspects of real estate transactions. He's going to give specific guidance about how to deal with the world of real estate, purchase, sales, rentals, commercial properties, as we try to come to terms with the coronavirus. Ira, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be on here.
So what is your, as we navigate the coronavirus, in short, what is your message to buyers, sellers, renters, landlords, people on the fence about moving ahead with real estate transactions?
Well, I spend a lot of time now dealing with people who are in transactions themselves. I have people who are in leases and want to know when they can't, if they have a business and they can't operate their business, should they continue to pay rent? And I represent landlords that want to know what their rights are when their tenants aren't paying their rent. So you go through that process, and then I talk to a lot of people that are interested in buying their properties or selling their properties. So in general, this is one of those things where you talk about it's moved the needle in terms of things that are happening in real estate, and it's causing changes. And definitely, use counsel. Use advisors in this time. Everything, what people said what was happening 2 months ago does not apply right now.
So what should the tenant's perspective be, or their best strategy in trying to work through the virus issue with their landlord now and for the next few months?
Well, the first thing a tenant should be doing is staying aware of what's coming from Governor Cuomo, the City Hall. There's many things that state about in terms of what they can do against their personal guarantees. Landlords now can't even try to do any eviction proceedings until August 20th with commercial or residential tenants, and that can be pushed back. So it's important to stay on top of what's going on from government, because the government's passing rules and executive orders every day, changing the process a little bit. And then being in contact with your landlord, if you're a tenant, be in contact with your landlord and understanding some of my tenants are using, quote, their PPP money and paying the 2 months that they were shut down. And others are like, even that is not enough for them. They have to restructure their lease. They are paying too much with the business. It will not bounce back fast enough. And they're not going to be able to make the payments going forward. So we're working with landlords and trying to restructure leases. In some cases, add time to the leases. In some cases, draw down security. So there's a lot of different aspects tenants can use.
And what do you think is the best perspective for a landlord in a commercial property in trying to keep tenants, to try to keep their business operation going forward?
Well, I really believe that in a commercial setting, commercial rents are going to drop a lot. So they're going to drop, and when I mean a lot, I mean it could be almost 50%. I mean, you're hearing some things, people say 5%, 10%, but there's just no tenants, especially in Manhattan, that are filling these spaces that are going to come in. So the point is that if you have a landlord and you have a tenant, and the tenant seems to be someone who's been a great tenant, paying their rent, this is the time to really make a deal with them and work with them. And I really am trying to, when I represent tenants, to work with the landlords and saying, look, this tenant has been there 10 years. They have never missed a rental payment. This is unprecedented that they were shut down by the government, not able to operate. It's going to be slow going back, and work with them. And I think the landlords that are understanding this, I think they're going to have tenants in the future, because it's much easier to keep a tenant you have than to go out to the market and find a new tenant.
And especially in this market, it's going to be very hard. Is Manhattan going to fare worse than, let's say, Queens or Long Island? Are offices going to have branch offices in the suburbs or workspaces? Is the days that we know it commuting to Manhattan being the financial and legal center, going to be over?
Very good point. I definitely think you're seeing it right now. Commercial tenants are realizing they can work remotely. They don't need people coming to the office 5 days a week. And that has the effect of they don't need so much space, but also people that felt like they had to be in Manhattan. They had to be near their office so they could walk to the office or they want to do. Now they can get a house at 2 hours away, 2.5 hours away, just somewhere where if they have to go to New York 1 day a week, they can get there. That type of situation where they don't have to be going 5 days a week, commuting hours and hours. So I think you're seeing areas like I throw up a town like Allentown, Pennsylvania, which would be pretty ridiculous to commute from Allentown to New York every single day. But if you had to do it 1 day a week, you potentially could do that. But if you move to Allentown, you could have a larger house. You could have offices in terms of you can have a house with more rooms, a yard, pool, those type of things. So you're seeing that push out into the city and into Long Island too, where you can have houses.
And what about this configuration of offices? Are desks going to have to be further apart, especially where there's a common area? Those days of 6 people, 10 people working at a long table, neck to neck, are those going to be over?
Well, the landlords are saying that because of that, because the spaces are now going to have to be, people are going to be spread out, the tenants are going to need more space, but not necessarily. What I'm hearing from a lot of my clients is that they're not going to require people to come back to work and everybody there. They'll you could come in a certain day a week. You could come in for a meeting. We could have maybe shared spaces, more like WeWork spaces in terms of you're going to let them know. But yeah, you're going to see more cubicles. Remember that the whole thing that started the bullpen was the Michael Bloomberg style when he was pictured at Bloomberg in terms of working in there's no corner offices, no walls, but that way of coming back to offices is definitely going to happen.
And what about in the residential setting? Is the advice true also that landlords should consider cutting the rent or extending the terms of the lease if they get along and like the tenants?
For residential, it's a little bit different because there are residential tenants that are doing well in this market. I mean, people are still working at their jobs. They're still making money. So you have a situation where that it depends. I would say that on residential, it depends, and it depends on the area. And that situation is just in flux. I mean, when people, certainly there's people that are not gaining an income. They're not making any money. They can't be paying their rent. So it's helpful to landlords to try, if you have a good tenant, to work with them and try to. Now, remember, on a residential setting, the leases are typically a year, maybe 2 years. Commercial, retail, much longer, 5, 10-year leases.
And what will happen at, let's say, shopping center space, either a mall or a shopping center? How are the dynamics going to change for the tenants and users and landlords of that space?
Well, the tenant mix is going to change. You're going to see less apparel stores. You're going to see more medical services. There's going to be a complete change. It's been going on. I mean, the Amazoning of America has been killing retail all over the place. But you're going to see definitely in the shopping centers, the mix of the stores is going to change, and a lot of stores are not going to be able to survive this. It's especially the sit-down restaurants. I mean, I represent lots of restaurants in the city and outside the city. And the sit-down restaurants, it just doesn't work. You cannot, it's hard to operate at 25 and 50% capacity. And when you eat food, I mean, people eat dinner at a certain period of time. The restaurants are depending for between 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock to be packed. That's the way because no one's eating and no one's in there at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock or in the morning. So the restaurants get all their money in a certain period of time. The whole idea of social distancing doesn't work because they're operating on such margins that it just doesn't make sense. That's why you're seeing so many restaurants, when they're allowed to open, not even opening because it doesn't make sense for them to open up.
But some restaurants, especially on Long Island, have been trying to build up their takeout business as a way of keeping some customers and to have some income coming. Can they expand that and build on that to have outdoor seating or use a parking lot area that may not be fully utilized?
Well, clearly the takeout is the restaurants that before the COVID that were doing strong with takeouts are strong now. I mean, there was an interesting article about Papa John's and pizza is doing extremely well in this market, in which you expect that pizza with delivery would be up. And you're seeing I have a lot of clients that do a tremendous amount of takeout, and their business has done well in this because people are taking more out. I think those restaurants will still prosper, still be around. I mean, a lot of them are a mixture of fast food and not, but like the restaurants that depended on have a buffet where you go and sat in a dining room after eating, picking your food at a buffet, they've closed. I mean, you see the restaurant chains like Sweet Tomatoes closed. So I think it just depends in terms of the mix of how this restaurant's set up.
And what about businesses like service businesses like cleaners or a small boutique store? Is there a future for them?
I think that there are small boutiques that I have a couple clients. I have a client that sells cowboy boots. Okay. I think there's always going to be something that a small little store that's going to be a unique brand that people still want to shop in. But I think the general mass merchandise, it's going to be very, very, very hard to do that. But in every center, you're going to have cleaners. You're going to have barbershops. You're going to have those type of service. And those are things that you've seen in shopping centers that have been coming back there. The shopping center has a grocery store, a pharmacy, drugstore, and then always cleaner, barbershop, those type of things.
Okay, I just want to remind our audience, you're listening to Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC. This is your host, Ken Landau. We're talking about attorney Ira Kaufman, who's telling us about how the pandemic is going to affect real estate and leases of both commercial and residential going forward. And he's provided a lot of expert information, and we're going to continue to pick his brain. Ira, in terms of the residential real estate market, let's say buying and selling homes, how have you found that going over the last few months? Where are we now, and where are we likely to go in the next few months for buyers and sellers?
Well, what you're finding is that people are looking for homes. I mean, so many people that I know, that you probably know, they've been trapped in their small one-bedroom apartments in the city, and a lot of these people have spent a lot of money for these one-bedroom apartments and for condos and co-ops in Manhattan. It's not something they want if there's a second wave to be in. They're not finding it comfortable. The people that are having, the idea of having a home office used to be a luxury. Now that's a necessity. A home gym used to be, that's a luxury. Now that's a necessity. The people that have a yard and pools, all those things that really didn't matter, now that people are really looking into that. So I'm seeing that in that flight of people in New York that now are looking for something outside the city, whether it's in New Jersey, Connecticut, northern New York or Pennsylvania. They're looking to be out of the city. And then I'm seeing also in Florida. I mean, if you look at the Florida area in the West Palm Beach and Jupiter, people are just buying houses left and right. I mean, the market in Florida is extremely strong in terms of people coming down buying homes. And the idea was, it used to be you'd have a nice apartment in the city and maybe a vacation home somewhere else. Now that's smaller. Now it's like your home outside New York is going to be big and your home in New York is going to be a pied-à-terre, one room apartment.
Or you might just come in for the day as you need it.
Yes.
And what's going to happen to those 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, be they rentals or condos or co-ops? Is their value going to go down in the city?
I hate to say it, but I have to think it will. I mean, New York has always, every time you thought the residential market was going to go down, it still stayed up. And people remind me the 2007 and 8 crisis, certainly after 9/11, all those things in the market. I mean, the New York residential market has been the most resilient real estate market you could ever imagine. However, I think just the COVID, in terms of people on top of each other, people wanting to be separated, and people, in fact, they don't just sit and be in a city, not just in New York, but San Francisco and all these cities. That trend of everyone moving to cities is going to change. So I do think there's going to be a major change in terms of the market. The residential market is definitely going to drop a lot.
And so buyers and sellers have to monitor that carefully.
I agree totally. They have to monitor it. And the one thing about real estate, it's always called a lagging industry. Like a stock market, if you see a company and there's good news or bad news, it immediately falls. It takes real estate longer to move. Like where the prices should be, it doesn't happen immediately. It's sort of after a while, after the house is on the market for 2, 3, 4 months, then the seller lowers its price. It's not just this automatic lowering of the price. So this is something that you're going to see over time, the lessening of prices in New York City.
And will that be true for luxury rentals and the rental market as well, or the non-regulated rental market?
Oh, yes. I think the luxury market's going to be hurt tremendously also. As I said, I think if someone's going to spend a lot of money, they'd rather have homes have with more bedrooms and just yards and everything. The fact that having this luxury apartment in New York, I mean, one of the things about having something in New York is you can use the culture and the restaurants and the bars and the clubs and everything. If you can't go to those things, it's not that that appeal isn't there. And I do think that people are going to spend more money looking outside. Maybe you'll have a house in Austin, Texas, or in LA or Miami or somewhere, but not so much in terms of where in New York City itself.
And you talked about the commercial rental market that's in the suburbs. What will happen with the residential rental market in the suburbs?
As I said, I think the suburbs. What I'm finding is that the suburbs are not. Look, I mean Brooklyn, which had been shot up, and also Manhattan. I think some of if you look at Queens and you look at Brooklyn and some of the houses, it's sort of flat. I mean, you have a lot of it's working class neighborhoods, but even other areas, I think you're going to see the market maybe not drop as much. It wasn't built up in the first place, so it's not going to drop as much. But people aren't afraid to go and be further out. I think they said people are looking for space. They're looking for distance. They're looking not to be on top of everybody, and I think that's important. I mean, somebody once I had a client tell me today they just want to have a place where they can go in. They don't have to see a doorman. They don't have to see anything else. Honestly, that's something that people were rushing to for the doorman. I see them getting away from that now.
And they just want to go to an office, a restaurant, or walk to the park where they're not so crowded.
Exactly. And that's why there used to be, how can you live out in Connecticut? It's so boring out there. You're an hour commute. That's such a boring thing. Well, boring is okay now. Boring is the people, now you're able to go to the walks, to the beaches, and you can do those things. You can go play tennis and there's not a people around. And you can walk even when you go for a walk. I mean, you look at people walking in Central Park, and I love Central Park. You never met a person. I've run thousands of miles in Central Park, so I love it. But the idea is you're on top of people. But you can go in these other areas outside of the city and have nice walks and not feel like people are on top of you the entire time.
And if you socialize, if you have a business meeting, you also do not want to be on top of people, whether it's your residential space or your workspace or your meeting place.
Right. And now we're seeing so much through Zoom meetings and other meetings. I mean, you're going to see the whole meeting market is going to change. The idea of calling everybody together to get in a room for 200 people to get all the sales force, you're just not going to see that. I mean, that in the near future and in the future going forward, I think people are going to get used to we could not have done this 20 years ago. I think 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, could you have Zoom meetings? It would have been impossible to have Zoom meetings. But now technology has allowed people to do this. So that's why, and then for these, if you're a commercial tenant, you're like, why do I need all this space to have all these meetings when I can just do it on my computer? I don't have to put everybody in a big room together and pay a fortune for all this space.
Or there might be a common meeting area. You don't need your own giant conference room that you're going to hardly use.
Right. Well, I think you're right. You would need definitely a common area for that.
Okay. I just want to remind our listeners that we're talking with Ira Kaufman. As you can hear, he's a very experienced real estate attorney. He represents developers, buyers, sellers, tenants, and landlords. What are some other tips that you have for the real estate world going forward to make it work, whichever seat you're in at the table? Well,
I think one of the things you have to be aware of is definitely, I keep hearing you to be smart in real estate is not to overreact, but it's also to understand that it's moved. The terrain has moved. Things have changed. And I think I speak to so many people in real estate that have been around and say, remember, as I said, 9/11, remember 2000, the financial crisis. Things are different now. And if you can't adapt to it, if you can't adapt to your buying and renting and don't understand there is a complete change, I think you have to come to the realization there has been a major change in the market. And you have to then just take advantage of that change or understand it and recognize that there has been this change and it's not going to go back to what it was. And I think that's the most important thing. I just don't see it going back. I mean, there's people that believe it will, but I just don't see, this has been going on for so long that I just don't see it ever going back to what we had before.
You mentioned earlier that landlord-tenant courts are on hold, payment of rent, trying to kick someone out is on hold. Should tenants and business people pay the rent if they can, or should they rely on Governor Cuomo's order to allow people to defer rent? And how is the landlords and real estate owners reacting to that?
Well, if I have tenants that can pay the rent, then I'm trying to work out deals. I'm trying to say, look, I have clients that are in good position. They're a type of business they didn't need it so much in terms of they're doing well. And then but it's not like I'm going to say, okay, now I'm going to pay my rent, but now I want something from the landlord. Can we work out a deal? Can we get a longer term of lease? Can I get more space? Is there something we could work out? So if you can pay your rent, I think it's a good thing to show to the landlord, look, I'm going to pay my rent, but I would want something out. Now I want something from you in terms of, can we make this a longer term relationship, or can I take more space?
And what about from the tenant perspective? Does the same rule apply? If you have the money, you should pay it and hope for some goodwill or fewer increases or decrease to reflect any altered market down the road.
I don't see the government actually saying you don't ever have to pay rent. There's been deferrals, but I don't see it becoming a total abatement just yet, because I do think the landlords industry's lobby in New York is strong enough to say we can't just abate this rent. Like you can't say, so I see this deferral. So eventually you'd have to pay your rent, but there is an issue that the fact that the landlord-tenant courts are completely bogged. When this happens, there's no way you could handle the landlord-tenant courts were overrun before COVID. They couldn't handle a matter like if you just showed you didn't want to pay your rent, it would take months and months and months to even get you out of your space. So the point is, it's going to be backed up for years with this. So if you can pay, and it just depends. If you're able to pay and you can work out, you have a good relationship with the landlord, then of course pay your rent.
And you might want to even talk about an extension, but perhaps locking in the rent or lowering it a little bit for goodwill and changes in the market.
Correct.
Okay. We just have a few minutes left in the show. Tell us your website and resources and how you can be of help to the various constituencies we mentioned.
My website is nyrelegal.com, nyrelegal.com. It's Ira Kaufman. My number is 917-484-2206. 917-484-2206. But usually what I try to do to help people is a lot of these leases, people do leases all the time, and they're 100 pages long and they're 75 pages, and there's a lot of clauses in these leases that people don't really understand. And so many, this is what I've been doing for 25 years. I've been doing real estate leasing and negotiating these deals for the largest corporations and for the smallest mom and pop stores. So I really understand these leases, and that's what you really have to have an attorney, whether it's me or someone else, that just understands how these leases work and what your rights are in these leases. I've looked at leases and people say, do I have to pay the rent? And I look at them and I say, wow, under this provision, under this force majeure provision, you don't have to pay the rent. Or I'll say, well, this could be your claim or not your claim to do. But it's like I look at like all the areas of the lease. I look at the casualty, the condemnation, the force majeure to understand in terms of what you have to do with the paying the rent. But it's important to give your lease to somebody that really understands what the meaning of all those words are.
And just tell us for a moment what force majeure means.
Force majeure means an impossibility of performance, meaning that that you wouldn't say that the government, I actually had this in a few of the leases I've negotiated with my tenants, where if the government shut you down, I didn't have to pay rent. I'm unable to pay the rent because of a government shutdown. And then you have it right. So it's something that is an act of God or a government or a fire, or not fire, but because that's casualty, but of some event that stops me from being able to do something.
Beyond your control.
But beyond my control.
And so that the landlord would just have to eat that.
Correct.
As opposed to tenant.
Yeah, that's been negotiated. I mean, I'll give you an example. I did some leases around Trump Tower a few years ago, and in those leases, because I was nervous that what if the president lived there and those issues in terms of getting into space, and what if they were shut down, and I got from our landlords the right to not have to pay if I can't enter my space. If I'm not allowed to go to the building because of a government restriction, then they wouldn't have to pay. So even though we sort of understood that's what we had in there. But there's other situations where, yes, but in most cases, I would say 99% of the leases do not have a protection for tenant, that in the event of a government shutdown, they still have to pay their rent.
And will there be new lease provisions going forward concerning COVID, concerning cleaning, concerning hazmat activity?
Of course, yes. And also about the government, it's going to be tenants that are in any position are going to say, look, if I'm shut down because of a government shutdown, I don't have to pay the rent. And you're going to have this negotiation back and forth about that. And definitely the cleaning is going to be important. I mean, landlords in New York commercial buildings typically provide cleaning services. And if you want more, you have to pay for it. But now it's going to be more expected to have different cleaning. We saw this after 9/11 in terms of the security. Remember, before 9/11, you would walk into most buildings, there was no security. You just walk in your elevators. Now that's completely changed. So I expect some sort of changes the same way after 9/11.
If you're in a building in Manhattan that has a lot of, whether it's office or residential, that has a lot of luxury features, recreational, a pool, a gym, and you're not able to use those, do you have any recourse?
That's a really good point. And that's the question is, and you're running into it, but that's everywhere. I mean, you have buildings everywhere even in Florida where the HOAs have restricted your use to be able to use pools and things. So that became that would be something in terms of your own HOA rules. Typically, that the landlords and the HOA make it clear that this is just you just have a benefit to use it, and they can really shut it down at any time. Almost everything clause that I've seen has said that. But you could make a claim that this is one of the reasons why you live here, to be able to have all these amenities.
And what if it's a lease in a commercial or residential building? It's part of what you're paying rent for.
Right. Well, if it's a lease, then I'd ask for a reduction in the rent in terms of what I felt like that. If I'm supposed to have if I'm supposed to have a fitness center as part of my lease and I can't use the fitness center, then I should be able to get an abatement for that period of time. I believe that's so.
Any final thoughts you have, and just give us your website again, where our listeners can find out more information about their options and the world of real estate and the world of leasing.
Well, I think the idea is, if you're a buyer and you're looking, I mean, people said, how can you buy homes? What's a buyer in this market? Well, if you have money, I've always thought real estate is a tremendous investment. And I think that if you are on the fence of buying that house, so many of my friends were in the city thinking about moving to the suburbs. Don't wait. This is the time to buy. This is the time to find, because I think prices are just going to go up. So don't be afraid to make real estate investments during this time. The market is in flux, but that still means you can, get great opportunities. So I would say that. And if you are leasing, just be careful. Try to work deals out with the landlords. And I think if landlords should be trying to work out deals with tenants. But my website is nyrelegal.com, nyrelegal.com, and my phone number is 917-484-2206.
Any final thoughts you have as we navigate the pandemic over the next few months?
I just think that it's important in terms of real estate, as I said, just said, that real estate investing is something that it's exciting, because you have so many people, more people are invested in real estate than they are in the stock market, because people are either leasing, which is actually an investment because you're getting a lease, or they own their own home. And I think that that's what's exciting. This is, I view everything as an opportunity for somebody to look at a home, to buy their first home, to buy their second home, or to make a move, or to lease space in something that they weren't able to get before because maybe the rents have gone down. So I just view everything as an opportunity in terms of for people.
And also, if you have the wherewithal perhaps to buy some commercial space at the new lower price, if you're going to really use it, and maybe rent it out to others.
Right. I mean, there's people that have always said, clearly, if you can come up with a concept, look, COVID is causing changes how people operate and act, but there's businesses that flourish among anything. And if you're able to run a restaurant and maybe not have so much contact and have a restaurant that's cool and people come up with ideas. We're a very entrepreneurial country, America is, and everybody comes up with ideas no matter what. And this is the time where people have these great ideas and go run with it.
It could be the restaurant with the moving roof, so you have an open air space. I'd like to thank our guest, Ira Kaufman. As you've heard, he's a real estate attorney. He knows all about commercial, residential, what the buyers and the sellers and the renters are concerned with. If you missed any portion of the program, you can go to the NCC podcast at nccradio.org or tell other people about the podcast, or you can find many other podcasts of Law You Should Know and other programs on WHBC. Please join us next week at this same time on 90.3 WHBC, the voice of Nassau Community College.